Chapter 8. Del. This is before he cheats, I said into the mic before picking a few notes on my guitar. The room was much emptier than it was last time I auditioned, but it didn't matter. There was only one person I was worried about being present, and so far I hadn't seen him. Guess he hadn't killed it like he thought he had. This Carrie Underwood song had been playing on repeat in my head for hours, and I knew I needed to perform it today. I knew I needed to get it up and out of my system if I was ever going to get over what happened this morning. I didn't search the crowd like I usually did when on stage. I didn't care what everyone was thinking of my performance. This song was for me. And that bastard Theo. I dug deep as I slid into the final chorus, pushing my voice to the limit and nailing every single note. My eyes were squeezed closed and I wasn't sure when that happened, but I opened them again and finished the song. My chest heaved as I stood there, trying to compose myself before I had to play again. That was great, Del, the head guy said from up front. We're ready for your original whenever you are. They'd requested we do 2 songs today, one by us and the other whatever cover we wanted. I hadn't been sure of which original song I was going to go with until that moment. I shot a grin at the crowd and leaned into the mic again. This is called Wake Up Without Me. This song was old, so I performed it 100 times before, and the chords almost played themselves. It was upbeat and flirty and all about having a good time and then leaving before morning, which was exactly what I planned to do after this. I was Del McCoy, and I'd never been hung up on a man in my life. This wasn't going to be the day I started. The song sucked me in and pulled me under as I got lost in the music. This always happened when I played my own stuff and was perfect timing. I needed to remind myself that I was one and done Del. I didn't do second dates. I didn't do cuddling after sex. I was here for a good time, not a long time, and I didn't intend to spend it with just one person. So thoughts of Theo more needed to go. Memories of his calloused hands on my hips and his mouth on my skin needed to go. I hadn't ever pined over another woman's man, and I was pissed as hell Theo made me do that now. The song ended on a note I held longer than I ever have before. Felt good, and I knew I nailed it. When I was done, the handful of people in the crowd clapped and I smiled. Thanks. Have a good day, y'all. I walked across the stage and carefully climbed down the stairs before I heard his voice. Oh, so you do know how to say goodbye. My feet froze on the step before the rest of me knew what was happening, sending me flying down the rest of the way. I landed against a familiar chest with a grunt and ripped myself out of his arms before I could get too comfortable. A million words wanted to stream out of my mouth, but I held them all back. Except for 2. Thanks. Bye. I turned around to make a speedy exit but didn't even get 2 feet before his tight grip was around my wrist. Hold on there. Let go of me, I said as I yanked my arm out of his hold. He held up his hand in surrender, but his eyes burned as he stared at me. I know all you want to do is run off, but I have something for you. I narrowed my eyes at him, jaw clenched tight. I hated when people made assumptions. You don't know anything about me, and I don't want anything from you. I spun around to leave again when his loud voice stopped me. Guess I'll just donate your clothes then, he called after me. Although I think I'll keep the panties. I whipped back around to glare at him. Will you shut the hell up? I hissed as I hurried back over to him. Give me my things, I demanded, my hand held out to him. His eyes still burned, despite how cold his expression was. Well, I tried to talk to you nicely, but you just kept walking away from me. Hell, you could have just taken them with you this morning if you hadn't jumped out of the fucking window. The fire that had been burning in my gut all day roared to life as I took a step closer. Maybe I don't want to talk to you. Maybe I'd rather jump out of a fucking window than see you again. Why? He yelled louder. What the fuck did I do? I laughed, the sound a little crazed. Did you really think I wouldn't hear? Did you think you were being clever? He shook his head. What the hell are you talking about? I heard you talking to your wife this morning. My wife? Girlfriend? Partner? Baby mama? Bae? What the fuck does it matter? He shook his head, his brows bunched tight. What the? Hey Del. Just the person I wanted to see. I froze again for the second time in the past 5 minutes. Honestly, I didn't know how much more of this my poor heart could take. We both turned as the head guy from earlier approached us. Hey, sorry. I'm bad with names, I admitted with what I knew was a charming smile. He grinned back. No worries. It's Mason. And I see you've met Theo here. My stomach flipped deep inside me like I'd be sick. Yeah, we've met. Great. Did he tell you the good news? My gut twisted in a way that told me the news wouldn't be good. What the hell was going on? Theo cleared his throat next to me, and my heart pounded in response. No. I didn't realize it was finalized. Mason just smiled wider. After today we were all pretty convinced. Weren't you? Theo glanced at me out of the corner of his eye, and my heart only thumped faster. I hated that about myself. Yeah, of course. It's decided then. Mason turned to me. We'd like to welcome you on tour. We leave tomorrow morning. Everything went really quiet for one whole second before I spoke. We. Mason's smile never dimmed. Sure. Me, Theo, and the rest of the guys all loved your energy. We think you'd be a great addition to our show. What the fuck? I turned to Theo, 100 questions causing a traffic jam in my head, but he wouldn't look at me, and that sick feeling in my stomach slowly dispersed, leaving nothing at all behind, just a jagged empty hole. Oh, Macy! The high-pitched voice rang out backstage, breaking the staring contest I was having with the side of Theo's face. Declan. Mason sighed as he turned to the group of men approaching us. I've told you not to call me that. The guy out front with the messy blonde hair and big grin on his face pinched Mason's cheek as he walked by. I love you too, Macy. I had only a second to take this guy and his big personality in before his eyes landed on me and he gasped. Holy shit, you're hot. Declan raced toward me as my cheeks heated and Theo tensed at my side. Oh my God, he yelled as he stopped just inches away. You're even hotter up close. His blue eyes swam with mischief and pure adoration as he dropped to one knee. Will you marry me? Theo grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt and dragged him to his feet. Act normal for a minute, he grumbled. Declan shook off his hold and turned to me with a smile. Offer still on the table. The fuck it is, Theo spat. Declan rolled his eyes as I turned to watch another werewolf join us. This guy was covered in tattoos from his neck to his fingers and had a glare on his face that only made him more handsome. His sharp eyes met mine and I had to fight to hold them. Rule number 1. Never miss a show. Rule number 2. No fucking the help on tour. Roman, Mason said, his voice stern. That's not the kind of shit we need to be going over at the moment. Roman shrugged. Might as well get that out there now. Declan reached for my hand and brought it to his lips. I'll wait for you. I couldn't help the giggle that spilled from my mouth, but it was short-lived. Thanks, I said to Declan as I gently extracted my hand from his. I'll keep that in mind. His answering smile was warm and for a second I thought maybe I wasn't kidding about remembering his offer. Theo grabbed Declan by the shirt again and ripped him away from me. Be serious for a fucking second. Declan rolled his eyes and crossed his muscled arms over his chest. Fine, but where's the fun in that? No one answered him. Okay, wait, I said, my hand in the air as my head spun out of control. I got the gig. Mason nodded. If you want it, it's yours. We'd love to have you. I looked around at all the big werewolves surrounding me. And y'all are the band. Roman snorted as one of the other men finally spoke up. Yeah, the 5 of us are in the band and Mason's our manager. I nodded slowly as I looked at each man, saving him for last. So this was another lie. Another deception. He'd made me believe he was just auditioning to open for this band when he was the band. My blood boiled furiously in my veins as I tried to control my temper. He must think he's so slick that he could just give whatever story suited him. At the time, that he could switch his masks whenever he wanted to be someone else. Who did I spend last night with? Who was standing next to me right now? Were they even the same person? And most of all, what the fuck did I just get myself into? So Delaware, what kind of equipment do you travel with? I need to make plans for where that stuff goes. I shook my head, willing some of the rage from my system so I could speak. My mouth was so full of accusations I was choking on them. I cleared my throat, but it barely helped. I just have my amp mic and guitar. Great, Mason said with a nod as he pulled out a sleek black phone. That can go in with everything else, he muttered. When he looked up again, he met my eyes. Are you okay with traveling on our bus with us? We can give you a private room. This was all happening so fast. 1 minute I was auditioning for a fun gig and trying to avoid the slimy guy I slept with, and the next I was getting my shit packed on a tour bus and leaving town with that slimy guy. It felt like I needed a minute to breathe and process everything, but there wasn't time for that with Mason's questions flying at me. Yeah, that's fine. You sleep in the private room, Theo spoke up. I glanced at him to see his hard eyes on Mason. The manager shrugged. I can take a bunk so Dell has some privacy. He looked down at his phone and mumbled, anything to protect her from you assholes. When Mason looked back up, his smile was wide. Okay, we leave for Raleigh in the morning. Can you meet us here by 8? Holy shit. I was leaving to go on tour tomorrow. The excitement rose in my system until I remembered who I was going on tour with. How was I going to travel on a bus with this man? How was I going to see him every single day and not slap his handsome, scruffy face? Mason was still staring at me, waiting for an answer, so I shook my head again to clear it. Yeah, I can be here at 8. Great. We'll see you then. Mason turned to leave when I spoke again. Wait. How long is this tour? Where are we going? The manager spun back around. We covered this before the first audition, he said slowly. I winced as my face grew warm and I gave him a pained smile. I was a tiny bit late that day. Theo chuckled and I just barely resisted the urge to turn and glare at him. We're in the final stretch of a 9-month tour. We have 8 weeks left and we'll be traveling as far north as New York before we wrap things up in Nashville. We'll be covering all travel fees and you'll get a percentage of ticket sales. All that sound okay? It sounded like a fucking dream, but I was still standing next to the one man on earth I never wanted to see again. Was I really about to go on tour with him for 2 whole months? But how could I turn it down? How could I walk away from an opportunity like this? I couldn't. And hell, I refused to let a man run me off. I wanted to go on this tour. I'd worked hard for years for this kind of opportunity. From what I'd heard, FaZe was a huge band with a lot of fans in a lot of cities. This could be the exposure I needed to take my music career to the next level. And Theo fucking Moore wasn't about to stop me. I opened my mouth to answer Mason when a familiar ringtone rang out. Theo reached for his phone immediately and answered it without hesitation. Hey, how's it going? He asked in a soft voice as he walked away. It was probably his wife. Did she know he took home strangers while on tour? Did she know he made every woman feel like the only woman? Did she know he answered her call this morning with me naked in bed with him? Dell. Mason interrupted my dark thoughts. With one last glance at Theo, I turned back to Mason and nodded. Sounds good to me. I'll be here tomorrow morning at 8. Chapter 9. Dell. You're late. My heart thumped so hard behind my ribs I thought it would break free. I'd just entered my dark room as the female voice broke the silence. When I turned around, I found my sister sitting in the shadows. Fear faded to irritation before it all turned to joy. I squealed as I raced toward her. When did you get here? I asked as I crawled onto her lap and wrapped my arms around her neck. B grunted beneath my weight. I got here on time, unlike you. She shifted beneath me and let out another huff. And could you get your ass off me? But I missed you, I sang as I squeezed her tighter. My sister chuckled. Before standing up and letting me fall to the ground, I glared up at her from the floor. That wasn't nice. She shrugged and ran a hand over her expanding belly. You were squishing your nieces and nephews. I continued to stare at her, noting how much she'd changed in just the few weeks since I last saw her. Biz's belly was rounder. Even her face had a little extra weight to it, and it looked good on her. In fact, I don't think I'd ever seen her look more beautiful than she did right then. Her hair was thicker, eyes brighter. I hadn't thought it possible, but somehow my older sister looked even more confident, more sure of herself and her place on this rock. Wish I could say the same. Is it my fault they're making you so fat I can't fit on your lap anymore? Grumbled as I climbed to my feet. B laughed and shook her head. I'm not fat, I'm pregnant. And there's no need for you to ever sit on my lap. I shot her a glare and she chuckled. Again. Where were you? You know Callie's going to skin you if you're late to the ceremony. I rolled my eyes as I kicked off my heels on the way to my closet. I usually would never audition without my lucky cowboy boots, but I'd left them at Theo's place this morning and I'd already considered them a lost cause. Although, if he'd been willing to give me back my clothes, maybe he'd give me Back the boots too. Well, almost all my clothes. A warm blush spread from my cheeks all the way down my neck as I remembered Theo threatening to keep my panties. The shame wasn't far behind, though. I needed to stop thinking about a married man that way. He was in a relationship with someone else. They had kids, for fuck's sake. It was so wrong of me, and I'd never felt lower in my life. Del. My sister's unusually soft voice broke me out of the spiral of hatred I'd been trapped in. Yeah. Why are you so late? Oh, I said as I flopped onto my bed. I had an audition. Beat scared as she headed for my closet. It didn't go well? I sighed. No. It went great. I got the gig. My sister stopped dead in her tracks before spinning around to face me. You did. The smile was spreading across her face and my chest warmed. What's the gig? I shrugged, but I couldn't stop a grin of my own. I'll be on tour opening for a big band from Nashville. B's dark brows furrowed. I don't get it. That sounds great. I sighed louder and thumped my head on the mattress beneath me. It's a long story. B walked back over and grabbed my wrists, pulling me into a sitting position. Tell me this long story while you get ready. We have to be downstairs in 20 minutes. Fine, I grumbled as I headed for my closet and the dress Evie stuffed in there days ago. So why aren't you excited about this job? My chest warmed again, hearing my sister refer to it as a job. There'd been a time when no one thought I'd take this seriously. I couldn't really blame them. After I flitted from hobby to hobby through my teen years. But something happened the first time I picked up a guitar. Felt so natural. In my hands I never wanted to set it down again. The first time I wrote and played my own song I cried and I'd never looked back since. I let out a deep breath as I focused on B's question. I'm excited for the opportunity, just not excited for who I'll be going on tour with. Explain. My lips twitched. Since B met her fated mate and got knocked up, she'd been a much softer version of herself. It was times like this when she was slinging out one-word commands that I was assured my sister would never really change. That small smile fell right off my face when I thought about Theo again. Turns out the guy I went home with last night is in this band I'm opening for, I said through gritted teeth. Oh, Delaware. B sighed. I whirled around to face her. I didn't know he was in the band. He told me he'd been auditioning too. She shook her head, her eyes growing harder. So you guys spent the night together and then you got mad when you realized he lied to you about being in the band. I laughed, the sound cynical even for me. Oh no, that's nothing. Finding out he lied about being in the band was just the icing on the fucked up cake. No. What really sent the whole thing to hell was when he picked up his wife's call while still in bed with me. B's jaw fell open and a tiny thrill of justification ran through my system. Are you sure it was his wife? She asked, her expression making it clear she was grasping at straws. He called her baby, I sneered. He asked her about the kids. B's mouth opened even wider, and this time all I felt was disgust. I just had a hand in breaking up some kid's family. It was only a matter of time before he slipped up and his wife found out what he got into when he was away from her. I was just another nameless, faceless threat to this poor woman's way of life. I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat and ripped my bridesmaid dress off the hanger. That's, B began and paused like she was at a loss for words. That's fucked up. I chuckled once, the sound not happy at all. Yeah, it's bullshit. And now I have to spend 2 months with this asshole on tour. I spat, the anger rising as I yanked the dress up over my hips. How is that going to work, Del? You're not the most discreet when you're unhappy about something. I turned to glare at her. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She waved a hand in my direction like that was all the proof she needed. It means you've never been able to hide the way you really feel about someone. How the hell are you going to keep things civil with this guy for that long? I spun back around and pulled the dress up where it belonged. It was ivory and fitted, hugging every curve like it was custom made for me. Knowing my crazy sister Evie, that was a possibility. Delaware. I sat down with a huff at my vanity table and glared at B through the mirror. I don't know, but I don't have a choice. Of course you have a choice. You don't have to work with an asshole like that. B. I sighed as I dabbed some powder on the makeup I'd slapped on before the audition. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm not throwing it away for some sleazy douchebag who thinks he's living the rockstar lifestyle. I'll just focus on my job and leave him alone. It'll be fine. My words seemed to appease B. Now I just had to hope I could believe in them, too. Do you feel that? I asked as I rubbed at my bare arms. B dragged her eyes away from her mate to frown at me. Feel what? We just finished taking hundreds of photos and been allowed to sit down under the lit-up canopy while Evie helped Callie change into her reception dress. The drinks were already flowing, and the crowd was boisterous, but all I could focus on was the buzzing sensation on my skin. The hair on my arm stood up straight as the sensation got stronger. Hey Del. I turned to find one of the Asheville pack enforcers standing at the head of our table. Hey Colton. What's up? He jerked his head over his shoulder. You've got a visitor. Why did those 4 little words make my heart pound like that? Who is it? I asked, proud my voice barely shook. Colton shrugged. No idea. Huxley talked to him and told me to come get you. Him. My mind raced with the possibilities as I stood and followed Colton back toward the lodge. Who would come here without calling or texting first? The farther we walked, the more my skin buzzed, until it felt like I was being shocked, and I had a sick feeling I knew who was here to see me. We rounded the side of the lodge, and 3 large werewolves came into view. 2 were my packmates, Huxley and Matthias. The third was the absolute last person I wanted to see right now. Theo's eyes locked onto mine as I approached them. What are you doing here? I finally asked. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Want me to get rid of him? Huxley asked, breaking us out of our staring contest. Yes, I said, just as Theo said. No. Let's go, Matthias said as he grabbed Theo's arm. He struggled in the enforcer's grasp as his hazel eyes met mine again. We have to spend the next 2 months together on a bus. Don't you think we should figure our shit out before we leave? He called as Matthias dragged him down the driveway. I pressed my lips together as his words made more and more sense. Wait, I called before I could think too hard about it. I turned to Theo. You have 2 minutes. Matthias released him and joined Huxley as Theo straightened his clothes. We'll be nearby, the former assured me. Not that close, I mumbled at their retreating backs before turning to Theo. Again. Even in the darkness, his eyes were bright as he stared at me. I don't even know what to say, he admitted after a long pause. That's not a good start, Moore, and now you only have 90 seconds. His eyes widened in panic. Can you just tell me what I did so I can apologize for it and we can move past this? I threw my head back, my laugh sounding crazy even to me. Apologize? For making me the other woman? Theo, there aren't enough I'm sorrys in the world that could make up for what you did. He jerked back like I'd hit him. Wait, what? The other woman? I narrowed my eyes as my hands fisted at my sides. Don't act stupid. I heard you talking to her this morning. I sneered. Theo's brows dipped low over his eyes. The only person I talked to besides Mason was my sister. The blood boiled in my veins. Why are you still lying? I'm not lying. You're trying to tell me you were asking your sister about the kids? You're trying to tell me you call your sister baby? Theo stared at me hard for a moment before he tipped his head back and laughed. His throat bobbed with his chuckles, and I swore I could get lost in that deep gravelly sound. I squeezed my fist so hard my knuckles creaked. Theo, I swear if you don't stop Logan at me, there's gonna be hell to pay. He pressed his lips together, but it hardly did any good. I'm sorry, Del. It's not funny. You're damn right it's not funny, you lying, cheatin', scummy asshole. Theo laughed again, and a deep growl rumbled out of my chest before I could stop it. He raised both hands in surrender. Okay. Just hold on, he said around another chuckle as he took a step closer to me. I know how it looks, but let me explain. 30 seconds, I said between gritted teeth. He just smiled wide. I was talking to my sister. My mom's been calling her baby ever since she was born, and it just kinda stuck. Everyone calls her that. You can ask Mason. My eyes were still narrowed as I watched him for any sign of deception. And the kids? Theo shrugged. That's what we call the dogs. Me and Louisa adopted 2 chocolate labs a few years ago, and she takes care of them both when I'm on tour. That kinda made sense. But I was still too angry to let it go. Why didn't you just say that? He rolled his eyes as he took another step closer. Now my skin buzzed like a live wire, just begging for his touch. You wouldn't let me talk, he reminded me. That was kinda true too. Theo reached for me, and with the last shred of common sense I had left, I swerved out of his range. What about the band? You lied about that too. He blew out a deep breath and nodded. You're right. I did lie about that. My hands were curled into fists again as the anger bubbled to the surface. Why? Why would you lie to me like that? Did you like making me look stupid? His eyes grew wide as he took another step toward me. No. Of course not. Well, it seems like I'm the only goddamn person who didn't know you were part of the band. He shot me a tentative grin. Is it my fault you're not a real fan? Theo, I warned. Okay, he said and blew out a breath so deep his shoulders fell with. I just wanted to know who you were before you knew who I was. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His words were playing over and over in my head as I tried to not let them make so much sense. Didn't I do the same thing to the people I dated? Didn't I always hide the fact that my brother and sister are both alphas? Wasn't it for the same reason? So I knew they were pursuing me for me, and not what I could do for them, so I could find out what kind of person they were before they found out the kind of connections I had. Was it fair to hold this against him when I did the same thing to others? Hell, with everything we talked about yesterday, I still never mentioned it. Did that make me a liar too? I didn't want to lie to you, Theo said, breaking me out of my tangled thoughts. I hated not telling you the truth, but the longer I went, the harder it was to say something. I was so afraid it was going to change what we had going. I gave him another glare. You think I'm so shallow I'd treat you different because of who you are? He shrugged, his eyes apologetic. It's happened before. I chuckled once because I knew exactly what he meant. But I'm not like that. Theo took another step closer, and now I could feel the heat radiating off him. My body swayed toward his, and I only just stopped myself before I fell into his arms. I know you're not, he said, his voice deep and quiet and meant only for me. I fought off a shiver as his scent washed over my senses. I'm sorry I lied to you, and I promise it won't happen again. His calloused fingers grasped my chin and tipped my head to meet his gaze. Can you forgive me? I stared into his bright eyes and knew without a doubt this man would be my down. Chapter 10. Theo. Del. I heard someone call her name, so I know she heard it too, but neither of us reacted. It was like we were alone on an island, her ocean blue eyes threatening to drown me. Del. I murmured, taking a step closer until there was no more distance between us. Will you forgive me? She took a deep breath in and let it out slowly, but she never looked away. No more lies. I nodded. No more lies. Okay. My lips twitched with a grin. You forgive me? She rolled her pretty eyes, but I could tell she wanted to smile too. This time. That's enough for me, I said as I wrapped my arms around her waist and pulled her chest against mine. She gasped softly and my dick was instantly hard. Del. This time the voice was much closer and impossible to ignore. I turned with Del still in my arms to find a woman who looked so much like her they had to be sisters. Hey B, Del said as she squirmed out of my hold. She cleared her throat and took another step away. What's up? B arched an eyebrow, her expression shrewd. Kelly's about to have her first dance. Oh shit, Del muttered as she raced to her side. Who's got my guitar? Evie has everything already set up. All you have to do is get your ass up there. Del nodded and turned to walk away, but she only got one step before she spun back around to me. Who's your friend? B interrupted. Del's eyes flashed with panic for one brief moment before she cleared her throat again. This is Theo. Theo, this is my sister B. Let's go. She grabbed her sister's arm, but B didn't budge. Nice to meet you, Theo. How do you know Del? She continued like there wasn't someone trying to physically drag her away. I reached up to scratch the back of my head as I tried to figure out how to navigate this situation. We met yesterday at the audition for my band. B's eyes flashed with intuition before she turned to Delaware. I see. Well, thanks for giving my sister a spot on your tour. I shook my head. We're lucky to have her. Despite the noise in the distance, the silence between the three of us was almost deafening. Finally, I had to break it. I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Delegate. Nice meeting you, B. I'd only taken one step toward the van I'd borrowed from the roadies when B called out to me. Do you want to stay for dinner? Beatrice, Del hissed. I turned around with a smile. The last goddamn thing I wanted to do was walk Away from Delaware. Not without another flash of her mischievous smile. Not without another chance to taste her lips again. If there's room, I said. Bea held out a hand, and like the gentleman I was, I offered her my elbow. In this pack there's always enough food. Wait, I don't think, Del called after us. You don't have time to think, Bea called over her shoulder. You need to go. Or Evie's going to gut you. Del grumbled but didn't say anything else as she sprinted past us on the way. Up the driveway. What kind of dinner is this? I asked as a giant white tent came into view. Our sister's mating reception. I didn't know which part of that sentence to start with. Finally I said, Y'all have another sister? Bea turned to frown at me. She didn't tell you we're quintuplets? My eyes widened. No. She did not mention that. She shook her head. I bet I know why, she muttered in a sing-song voice. Well, now you know, she continued at a regular volume. There's 4 of us. Girls and then our brother Abraham. I'm sure you'll meet them all tonight. Lovely, I mumbled. You know, I'm not sure I should be intruding like this, I said as I gently tried to extract my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong as she continued to drag me along with her. Nah, don't worry about it. No one will even notice you're here. I kept my skeptical comments to myself as she led us to a table off to the side. There were already 2 other men and a woman sitting there, and they all turned to me when we walked up. This is Del's friend Theo, Bea said as she sat next to the smaller of the 2 men. This is my mate Will, she said with a nod at him. I reached forward to shake the man's hand, although it was the very last thing I wanted to do. There was something different about him. I couldn't name it. But deep in my gut I knew I needed to be wary. The moment my hand touched Will's, that feeling only intensified, and it took everything in me not to jerk out of his hold. When I met his dark eyes, they were kind, his smile understanding. I know it can be disconcerting at first, but you'll get used to it. Get used to what? I asked as I retracted my hand and fought off the need to shake it out. That weird feeling you have when you're around me. It's just old magic and it'll be unnoticeable soon enough. I frowned at him as I wondered what the hell I just got myself into. Magic. I deadpanned. Honestly, if these wolves had dealings with witches, I was out. I already felt weird just being on Packlands after spending the past 20 years avoiding them. If they were fucking around with magic, I was done here. Bea laughed with a roll of her eyes. Don't worry. When he says it's old magic, he means it's ancient. My frown only deepened as I stood there staring at these people who weren't making any sense. The blonde at the table sighed and leaned forward in her chair. Don't mind them. They forget not everyone is used to their weird-ass wolfy voodoo. Will's the original werewolf. That's the magic you're feeling. I froze for one long second before turning wide eyes to Will again. You're the original werewolf. Like the shepherd from the legend. Will's smile was wide. You've heard of me? A single incredulous chuckle fell out of my mouth before a microphone whined loudly behind me. Someone grabbed my arm and my ass fell into a chair as I found Del at the front of the tent. Hey y'all. Thanks for being here for Callie and Wyatt's big day, she said. Her smile so bright it was almost blinding. When my sister told me she'd met her fated mate, I hadn't believed it. But from the first moment I saw them together, it was obvious they were made for each other. We're all so thankful for the day he joined this pack, and I know he'll make her happy for the rest of their lives. The crowd cooed at Del's sweet sentiments even as her smile fell for a moment, and she shot a stern look at the couple standing in the middle of the dance floor. Or else, she added. The crowd laughed as the man she'd glared at saluted her. Del winked and strummed her guitar. This is for them, she said as the lights went low under the tent. Everything faded away as Del opened her mouth and started singing. It was an acoustic, stripped-down version of the Elvis Presley song Can't Help Falling in Love, and every note dragged me deeper. Her gravitational pull threatened to suck me in, and I had to restrain myself from getting closer. Felt like she was singing just for me, and when her eyes finally swung my way, I swear my heart almost leapt out of my chest. I didn't notice time passing or the couple swaying in front of me. All that mattered was Del and the sweet music she was making. When the song ended, I realized I'd been leaning so far forward I'd almost fallen off the chair. I righted myself as discreetly as possible, but when I turned and found a table full of curious expressions, I knew I'd failed. So how did you say you know my sister? The big guy at the table asked. The power radiated off him as strongly as the mistrust, and I really couldn't blame him. If some douchebag showed up at my family's ceremony and drooled over my sister like I was, I'd have some questions too. I met her when she auditioned to open for my band yesterday. What's your band? It's called Phase. You probably haven't heard of us. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Actually, your song's been all over the radio this past week. I couldn't help the smile that pulled at my lips. Yeah, sorry about that. He lifted one shoulder. It's a good song. This time there was no stopping the grin. Thanks, man. His expression instantly fell. So what are you doing here? Did you go to every person's home who auditioned for you? Abraham, the blonde next to him admonished, but I didn't spare her a glance. I was still locked into a staring contest. I wanted to talk to her privately before we go on tour tomorrow. Abraham blinked, breaking our silent battle as the rest of the people at the table went quiet. What tour? The blonde finally said, just as Dell arrived. I'll do a couple more songs later, but I missed lunch and I am starvin', she said as she plopped down in a seat and grabbed a dinner roll from the middle of the table. Everyone was silent as we watched her tear into the bread like she hadn't eaten in days instead of hours. It was actually kind of funny, but the tense atmosphere at the table prevented me from laughing. Dell, Abraham said. She paused and looked up, a hunk of roll hanging out of her mouth. Huh? She asked around the food before chewing it up and swallowing it. I couldn't help the snort that fell out. Even the frown from Abraham couldn't make the adorably confused look on Dell's face less funny. He says you're going on tour, Abraham said. Dell turned to glare at me for a second before turning to her brother again. I just got home from the audition right before Callie's ceremony. I didn't have a chance to tell you guys yet. Tell us what? The woman I had to assume was Callie said as she walked up to the table with her mate. Dell sighed. Might as well wait for Evie to get here. I'm here. Another woman that looked just like Dell popped up next to the table. What's up? Dell bit her lip as she looked around the table at her family. I got that big gig I auditioned for. I go on tour with them tomorrow. No one said a word as the party raged on around us. Finally, the latest sister spoke up. Congratulations, Dell. That's amazing. Dell smiled. Thanks, Evie. How long will you be gone? Abraham asked, his harsh voice turning the mood somber again. 2 months. The creases around his eyes deepened, but it was Callie who spoke up next. You'll be gone for Christmas. Dell's face fell, and so did my heart as I watched her shoulders droop over. Something I could fix. She didn't need to go on this tour if she'd rather stay home. We could find someone else. One of the other callbacks would do fine. But selfishly, I didn't want to relieve her from her obligation. I didn't want to leave her behind. My thoughts were becoming desperate when Evie spoke up again, her voice higher pitched than before. Hey, who cares? You get to celebrate Christmas somewhere you've probably never been before. Maybe you'll even get a white Christmas for the first time ever. That'll be amazing. But what about transportation? Are you talking that old hunk of metal on tour? Dell's pink lips twitched with a smile, and my chest already felt lighter. No. I'm traveling on the bus with the band, and I get a percentage of the sales. Girl, this is paid? Evie yelled. Now Dell's smile was wide as she gushed to her sister. I sat quietly between them, not caring what they were saying as long as I got to be in her presence. Let's get back to why he's here, Abraham interrupted, drawing the attention of everyone at the table. His eyes met mine in a silent challenge that I didn't back down from. Let's not, Dell said as she grabbed my hand and dragged me to my feet. Come on. I'm hungry, she said as she led me to the buffet line. We were halfway there when Dell looked over her shoulder at me. Did you bring my clothes with you by any chance? I smiled wide and then wider when she tripped over her feet. Yeah, they're in the van. And my boots. Boots? Yeah, she sighed. I left my cowboy boots at your place. They might have gotten kicked under the couch. Okay, I'll find them before we leave. She nodded, but then her eyes narrowed as she stopped and turned to me. And my panties, she whispered. I smiled wide and shook my head. Not a chance. Her eyes grew round as the apples of her cheeks turned pink. That's stealing. That's payment. For what? She yelled. I took a step closer, bumping her chest with mine. It might have been my imagination running wild, but it almost felt like I could feel the steel bars in her nipples through all our layers of clothes. Fuck, it made me hard. I'm keeping your panties as payment for walking out on me without even a goodbye. I leaned closer until I could feel her warm breath puffing on my neck. I had so much more planned for you this morning. Do you know how disappointed I was when I couldn't find you? She glared up at me, and for some fucked up reason her bad attitude just made her hotter. Do you know how disappointed I was to find out you were married? I shook my head and stepped closer, grinning when I heard her breath catch in her lungs. But I'm not married. I'm single, and I'm free to do whatever I want with whoever I want. I grasped her chin and tilted her face up. And I want you. Her eyes burned with desire and indecision as I fought my own battles. Wanted nothing more than to drag her face the rest of the way to mine and kiss the shit out of her, but I held back. Somehow. Finally she shook her head, and that helped to clear some of the haze in my brain. No. We can't. Why the hell not? She was back to glaring at me. Roman said no one on tour can sleep with each other. Roman can eat a dick. Dell rolled her eyes. Mason didn't seem to disagree. I let out a deep breath and looked away. Technically, it's one of our rules. A chuckle fell from my lips, but it wasn't happy at all. Fuck, if you wanna get real technical, it's my goddamn rule. Dell nodded and stepped away from me, taking all that heat with her. Okay. Then we need to follow the rules. I groaned as she grabbed my hand and started dragging me toward the food. Again. This was going to be the longest 8 weeks of my life. Chapter 11. Dell. You know, Theo said as he followed me and picked up a plate of his own. We're not technically on tour yet, so we wouldn't be breaking any rules. My belly twisted, but I ignored him as I pointed to one of the dishes on display. That's Miss Elsie's famous potato salad. You need to try some. He slopped a spoonful on his plate. Besides, we're both consenting adults. No, neither of us would let it affect our jobs. My cheeks burned as I turned toward the meat. She's also got a killer Cajun chicken, and if you don't try a deviled egg, you'll be sorry. I don't give a shit about deviled eggs, he growled. I snatched one off the table and turned to him. Open up. His eyes were narrowed as he opened his mouth, and I popped the deviled egg inside. He closed it and watched me as he slowly chewed. Finally he swallowed and nodded. Okay, that shit was good. I giggled. Looks like you're saving some for later, I said, pointing at the corner of his lips. Theo's eyes lit up before he grabbed my arm and pulled me closer. Lick it off. For me. I squealed with a laugh as I struggled to get out of his hold. EW. No. Gross. Darlin', you licked a lot more than that just last night, he said in my ear. His deep voice rumbling through me and making my nipples painfully hard. Theo, I gasped and slapped his chest. He held my hand there, his heart pounding beneath my palm. It's true. But if you want, we can talk about everything I licked last night instead. A massive shiver raced down my spine as thoughts of his skillful tongue overwhelmed me. My legs shook as I fought to hold his gaze. No need. I've got a great memory, I finally said, proud that my voice was as strong as it was. Yeah, and I'm hungry. Let's keep it moving. We both turned to find my packmate standing behind us with his hands on his hips. I should have known better than to get between him and the deviled eggs. Sorry, Jimmy, I said as I pulled Theo along behind me. We were only halfway back to the table when he grabbed my arm and pulled me to the side. What do I need to say to convince you to spend another night with me? My heart was pounding in my throat as I looked up into his deep hazel eyes. You're really relentless. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. Yeah, I am when I see something I want. The butterflies in my stomach had turned vicious as I struggled with what to do. The truth was, I couldn't remember ever wanting anything more than I wanted. Theo. One night was definitely not enough to get my fill of him. Hell, a whole week might not be enough. But Roman was pretty clear when he said no one was allowed to hook up on the road. I didn't know what kind of authority he had, but it seemed like everyone else was listening to him. I couldn't afford to lose this gig. It was too big, too monumental in my career. I refused to throw that away for a fun time with some guy who'd be gone from my life in a couple months. But Theo was also kinda right. We weren't technically on tour yet. What would be the harm in spending one more night with him if no one ever found out? I can tell you're thinking about it, Theo said, his lips twitching with a smile. I rolled my eyes and grabbed his free hand. Let's go, Casanova. I'm still hungry. Theo chuckled as I dragged him back to our table. As soon as I got a look at my entire family huddled close and clearly talking about something serious, I knew I'd made a mistake. Gone. A second before I could turn us back around and flee, Evie made eye contact. Damn it, I muttered under my breath as my sister smiled at me. I pulled him the rest of the way there, my feet dragging with every step. Brace yourself, I whispered as we joined my family. How was the line? Ellie asked as we sat down. I shrugged, willing the blush off my face as I thought about everything that happened in that line. Not bad. She nodded and nudged my brother. Let's go. I'm hungry. Abraham chuckled as he stood and held out a hand for his mate. Of course you are. She glared at him, but he pulled her close and kissed the look right off her face. I turned away to give them some privacy, although I don't know why I bothered. Those two were shameless. Will, would you grab me a plate? Bea asked her mate. The original werewolf kissed the side of her head and stood. Of course. Wyatt? Callie asked next. Her mate shook his head, an indulgent smile on his face. I'll be back. I looked around the table and realized we were surrounded by all my sisters. It was then I began to panic. I never caught your name, Evie said as she leaned over me to shake Theo's hand. I'm Evelyn, but everyone calls me Evie. Theo shot her such a gorgeous smile it made me want to squirm, and it wasn't even directed at me. It's Theo. Nice to meet you. Evie spared me a loaded look before turning that charm back onto Theo. Pleasure's mine, handsome. You don't sound like you're from around here. Theo took his hand back and chuckled. Nashville, actually. So not too far from home. Do you have family back there? Is this an interview? I cut in. My sister shrugged with a smile. I'm just being friendly. It's okay, Theo said with a small smile in my direction. Yeah, I've got my mom and sister living outside the city. Ah, Evie said slowly. Your twin is a girl. Interesting. Theo gave her a quizzical smile. What's interesting about that? Evie leaned back in her seat and nodded my way. We've got a theory about men who have twin sisters instead of brothers. I bit my lip as Theo turned to me again, a small grin on his face. Oh yeah? And what's this theory? My face heated as he stared at me, and I swore I could have strangled my sister in that moment. We think they're better in bed, Evie called from behind him. My cheeks burned hotter as Theo's smile grew. Is that right? I swallowed past the embarrassment and mustered up a small smirk of my own. Is what right? That we have a theory? Or that I believe in it? Both. My stomach clenched as that one word rumbled through my body. Yes, I whispered. Yes, what? I cleared my throat. Yes, it's a theory we have. Theo's expression froze for a moment before I added, and yes, I believe it's true. His grin seemed to take up his whole face, filling my entire vision with his joyful expression. I lost track of time and space as he drifted closer, almost like he couldn't help himself. What did we miss? My loudmouth brother practically shouted as he arrived back at our table and slammed his plate down. I turned to glare at him as Evie spoke up. Whether men with twin sisters are better in bed or not. Why the fuck are we talking about that? Abraham said as he pulled out a chair for his mate. I get it, Ellie spoke up as she took a seat. My man's got 4 sisters and he's pretty friggin' amazing. Me and my sisters made gagging sounds as Abraham wrapped his arm around Ellie's shoulders. Damn right, baby. Gross, Evie said. But it's true. Sorry, Wyatt. The stoic enforcer shrugged. Having a twin brother instead of a sister didn't seem to faze him. Callie's got no complaints. I knew without a doubt Wyatt made her happy. Just like I knew she'd never settle for anything less. A familiar ringtone sounded from next to me and Theo pulled out his phone. Sorry, I need to take this, he muttered as he pushed his chair back and stood up. Before he could walk away, he leaned close and whispered in my ear. And it's my sister again. In case you're wondering. I held back the shiver, but only by sheer willpower. When he was far enough away that my skin stopped buzzing and I couldn't smell his cedar scent anymore, I finally unclenched my fists. You really think this is a good idea? My brother's harsh voice broke through the haze in my head, and I turned to him with a frown. Huh. Abraham gestured over my shoulder with his fork. You really think you should be involved with someone you're working for? My spine stiffened as the first tendrils of rebellion leaked into my system. Hated being told what to do. Always had. Just like Abraham had always loved to. Try to boss me around. I'm not involved with him, I said, proud that my voice was still even. And it's none of your business what I do. His eyes flashed with the first sign of anger, and I could feel myself respond. Instantly. My brother and I had always had a volatile relationship. I loved the man with all my heart, but there was no one who could get me riled up like he could, and I knew it was the same for him. Of course it's my business what you do, he seethed. I'm your alpha. Everything you do concerns me. If it's not happening on your land, it doesn't concern you. Goddamn it, Delilah. What do you think is gonna happen when you mouth off to the wrong person or you sleep through soundcheck and get kicked off this tour? Who do you think is gonna have to pick up the pieces then? Who's gonna be the one that has to drop everything to go get you after you fuck up again? Because you never take anything seriously. No one at the table even dared to breathe as I glared at my brother across the table. My pulse pounded in my ears as my hands shook, threatening to shift my body into a wolf at any moment. My instincts were to jump to my feet and rip him a new one, but that was what he wanted. He expected me to fly off the handle like I always did and confirm everything he just said about me. But fuck him. Abraham thought he knew everything, and I was about to prove him wrong for the first time in my life. I nodded once as I pushed my chair away from the table. Glad to hear how you really think of me, Abby, I said as I stood. My hands were still shaking, but my voice was steady, and that was all I could ask for. And don't worry, I'd rather walk across the country on 2 legs than call you for anything. My sisters yelled my name as I walked away, but I didn't turn around. I was afraid if I did, the tears I was just barely holding onto would fall. My asshole brother would never see how deeply his words cut me. Hey, where you going? Theo's voice broke through the fog in my head as he grabbed my wrist and pulled me to a stop. I looked up at him, and for a moment I was too tired to keep up all the walls I'd built. Too tired to keep him out when all I wanted to do was let him in. So I let him see it all. The hurt, anger, uncertainty, fear. It overwhelmed me with its intensity, and I finally had to squeeze my eyes closed to keep the tears away. Del, he cooed as he pulled me closer. What's wrong? I sniffed and shook my head, letting his scent soothe all the places that ached inside me. My brother's just an asshole. Theo scared as he wrapped his arms around my shoulders and squeezed. I don't have a brother, but coming from someone who is a brother, I would have to agree that we can definitely be assholes. I snorted against his chest and he chuckled, the sound rumbling through me. When I pulled away to meet his eyes again, I actually did feel a little better. Everything okay with your sister? I asked as I slowly extricated myself from his hold. Theo frowned, and I didn't know if it was because of my question or because I was pulling away from him. She's not having an easy time right now, he said slowly, and it's hard for her when I'm on the road. You guys are close. It wasn't a question because I already knew the answer. But Theo nodded anyway. Really close. It's hard for me too, but she's got so much more shit to deal with than I do. And besides, I'm the one who gets to leave, and she's the one who's stuck at home. It's always gonna suck more for her. My mind drifted back to my siblings as I wondered if it was going to suck for them while I was gone. I knew it hadn't been easy on anyone when we moved down to Charlotte and took over that pack. Now that I thought about it, maybe it wasn't the right time to leave them. But she's okay, Theo said, breaking me out of my thoughts again. She just wanted to talk about the kids. I rolled my eyes. You know, I still feel like I need that story of yours confirmed by at least one reliable source. Theo's smile fell as he pulled out his phone. I can call Mason now. He'll vouch for me. I looked at him closely for a moment before shaking my head. Nah, think I believe you. His grin was back. Good, because I don't want to talk to that dickhead right now anyway. I laughed. Why not? Because I want to dance with you. My heart stopped beating for one whole second before it started again, pounding against my ribcage so loud it was almost deafening. Theo, I don't know. He took a step closer, his woodsy scent clouding my head again. It's just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll go on tour and pretend like none of this happened. We'll both be professional and do our jobs, and no one ever has to know. I bit my lip as the need to be with him waged war against the tiny shred of common sense I had left. Theo reached for my chin and tipped my face up, his fingers electrocuting me. In the best way. I'll settle for just one dance if that's all I can have. I blew out a deep breath and nodded, the indecision melting away as quickly as it manifested. Okay, let's start with a dance. Theo's wide smile made my heart beat hard again. I'll take it. Chapter 12. Theo. I love this song. Del crowed as her blue eyes lit up. I had no clue what they were playing, but it didn't matter. My fingers wrapped around hers as I led us back under the tent and onto the dance floor. The song had an up-tempo beat I didn't recognize, but Del seemed to know all the words as she bounced and shimmied in front of me. I grabbed her hips and dragged her closer. Is this Katy Perry? Del pulled back, her expression incredulous. This is Taylor. I frowned as I thought through all the Taylors I knew. Swift. I finally asked. She nodded slowly. Duh. With a growl, I dragged her even closer, making her gasp. Sorry, I'm not a Swiftie, I said in her ear as I ground myself into her. That's kind of a deal breaker for me, more, she said as she leaned back to give me another grin. Guess this dance is over. She tried to pull away, but my hands were still on her hips and I wasn't letting go. I'll buy her entire discography right now if you just keep dancing with me, I said against the side of her face. Del threw her head back and laughed, the sound doing crazy things to my gut. My lips curled into a smile as I watched her try to control her giggles. Knew without a shadow of a doubt I'd do anything to keep hearing that sound. Maybe I'll give you a pass since you're so willing to learn. I dug my face into her neck and took a deep breath. If you were the teacher, I'd never miss a class. She laughed again and slapped my shoulder. That was lame, more. You're losing your touch. I squeezed her hips and grinded my hard dick against the junction of her thighs, making her gasp again. This touch. Del's eyes drifted closed as she shook her head. That is not the touch I was talking about. I chuckled as the song ended and a newer, slower one started up. Del pulled away from me with a sigh. Okay, thanks for the dance. She took one step back before I dragged her to my chest again. You said one dance, not one song. Del met my gaze again, her lips pursed. I think you're arguing semantics. If this is the last dance I get with you, I don't want it to end yet. Her eyes softened, pink lips curling with a smile, and I knew I'd never seen anything prettier. Without another word, she wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her head on my chest. My eyes fell closed as my heart swelled almost painfully. Why did having Del in my arms feel so natural, so perfect? Why did she fit there like no one ever had before? I let the answerless questions drift away as we rocked back and forth. Didn't matter what song we were dancing to. Hell, I didn't even need the music. There'd been a melody playing in my head since she walked into that venue yesterday, and it had only gotten louder. It was like nothing I'd ever written before, and that only made me want to write it more. I didn't know what it would turn into, but I kept listening. Anyway, my hands drifted to Del's back before I dipped her low, watching as her chest heaved with her short, harsh breaths. When I pulled her back up, her eyes were a summer sky blue that made my chest squeeze tight. The song's tempo picked up a bit at the bridge, and I took that opportunity to spin her away from me. Del's skirt flared around her thighs as she turned, coming to a stop a few feet away. Her beautiful face was lit up so bright I couldn't breathe for a moment. Why did making her happy feel so fucking good? I shook my head and tugged her back toward me, Del giggling as she twirled. Again. When she was only inches from my chest, she lost her footing and hissed in pain before her body tilted heavily to one side. I caught her before she hit the ground and hefted her into my arms. What was that? Del's face was scrunched in pain and my gut churned with dread. It's my ankle, she bit out. I just twisted it. I looked down at her feet, still strapped into those sky-high heels, and rolled my eyes. Why do women wear these things? I muttered as I carried her across the dance floor. They're dangerous. They make me look taller. I like how tall you are without them. They make my ass look good, she said next. Your ass looks good in anything. Del rolled her eyes and crossed her arms over her chest. Well, Evie didn't give me a choice, okay? I shook my head as I sat her down in an empty chair. Is your sister trying to kill you? You have trouble walking in regular shoes. Del narrowed her eyes at me. Haha. Am I wrong, though? She stared me down for a long minute before lifting her chin in the air and turning away. I couldn't help the chuckle that fell out of my mouth, but I'm Sure it didn't do me any favors. Which one is it? I asked. She stuck a leg out and I could already see the area around her ankle swelling. I gently lifted her foot and set it on my lap, ignoring her weak protests. You should get this seen. Do you have a pack, doctor? Dell shook her head and pulled her foot away. I'm fine. Delaware. It's just a sprain. It'll be better by morning. Trust me, I do this a lot. I snorted and shook my head. Yeah, I don't doubt it, I muttered. But we go on tour tomorrow and you need to be healthy. What if it's more than a sprain? And you need medical treatment? That'll be hard to do on the road with our schedule. You need to get it looked at tonight. Dell shook her head again and carefully climbed to her feet. I just need an ice pack and I'll be good. I stood with a heavy sigh. You're not gonna listen to me, are you? Nope, she said with a pop of her lips. Fine. I scooped her into my arms and stood up straight again. Which way to? An ice pack. I can walk, Theo, she grumbled. I'm not letting you injure yourself more and drop out of the tour. Now let's go find some ice. She huffed out a breath and crossed her arms over her chest. There's some in the freezer in the lodge. I turned toward the big-ass house beyond the tent and frowned. You're allowed to go in there. Dell rolled her eyes. I live there. My frown deepened as I carried her through the party. I thought your alpha lived there. He does, she said slowly. I looked down at her, my brows furrowing even harder. You live with your alpha? Yes, of course. So do my sisters and a shitload of enforcers. Almost half. This pack lives with our alpha. Why? Was this some sort of fucked up harem situation? I'd heard of alphas having mistresses but not 4 sisters. How was Dell okay with that? Because he's our brother. I stopped walking and stared down at her again. Abraham's the alpha? She nodded. You didn't tell me your brother was the alpha. Dell's eyes narrowed with a glare. You really want to get into that? Because there's a whole lot of shit you didn't tell me either. I shot her a weak smile. Fair. We made it up the back stairs, and Dell directed me to open the sliding glass door. Inside was a massive kitchen and several tables set up almost like a cafeteria. I guess a shitload of people really did live here. Freezer's over there, she said, pointing across the room. I followed her directions and sat her on a nearby counter before I turned to dig through the freezer for an ice pack. When I picked up her injured ankle, again it was more swollen than last time, the skin angry and pink. I really think you need to have this looked at. Dell grabbed the ice out of my hands and pressed it on her inflamed ankle. This is fine, she said with a sigh. Thanks for bringing me back up here. I stood there awkwardly, not wanting to leave, but not knowing how to get her to let me stay. Clearing my throat, I said, Are you going back to the party? I don't think so. I should really probably pack and get to bed early. She slid off the counter with a wince, and I was at her side immediately. What are you doing? I asked as I hovered, trying to figure out how to help her. She looked up at me with a frown. Going upstairs to my room. I nodded. That I could fix. I bent over and picked her up again. Okay, where are the stairs? Theo, she said, her voice stern. Yes, Dell, I said as I walked us across the kitchen to what looked like a hallway. I'm capable of walking to my room. If you were capable of walking, you wouldn't have sprained your ankle. She squealed in outrage and I had to hold back a laugh. If I'd been walking, I would have been fine. But you had me spinning, and I lost my balance. My stomach twisted and the smile fell off my face. I looked down at Dell and waited until she met my eyes. You're right. This is my fault. I'm sorry. She stared at me for a long time, her gaze full of something I couldn't name. Finally, she shook her head. It's not really your fault. I'm the clumsy one. No, you're right. I spun you too hard. I should have been more careful. Took a deep breath and let it out slow. Will you please let me get you somewhere safe so I know you're okay tonight? Dell continued to watch me, her blue eyes dancing with secrets I knew I needed to learn. Fine. Stairs are out there. I'm on the 3rd floor. I hurried across the kitchen in that direction, fully aware she could change her mind at any moment. Are you sure I can't convince you to see a doctor tonight? Don't push your luck. I sighed. Okay, how about a wrap? Fine, she gritted out. I have one in my bathroom. Happy. I glanced at her ankle, noting it was even bigger than last time I looked. Not at all, actually. Dell's soft hand landed on my chest and there was no stopping the way my heart pounded. I'm telling you it's not your fault. You spun me around twice as much last night and nothing happened. I'm just a klutz. I looked down and gave her a small smile. Last night you weren't wearing those death traps on your feet. Quit picking on my shoes. They're gorgeous. They're all right. Look, she demanded as she lifted her leg in the air to show off her shoe. Don't tell me they're not sexy. A single thread of self-control snapped, and I pulled her closer. They still got you hurt, so I'm not a fan. I took another look and then met her gaze again. Although now that I think about it, I bet they'd look sexy as fuck. With your legs wrapped around my neck. Her mouth fell open with a soft gasp that made my dick ache. Theo. It sounded like a reprimand, but I could smell how much my words turned her on. I could see the way her pupils dilated when she looked at me and hear her choppy breaths. She wanted me as bad as I wanted her. When we reached the third floor, I cleared my throat and pulled my eyes away from her plump lips. Which way? I'm down that hall, she said with a jerk of her head. Last door on the right. The walk to her room seemed to take forever as my cock strained against my zipper and my heart beat against my ribs. When I reached her door I took a deep breath and let myself in, knowing that whatever I found would give me another small piece of this complicated woman. Dell cleared her throat as her face turned pink. Sorry for the mess. I looked around at the piles of clothes and shoes on every available surface and smiled. It was so Delaware, don't worry about it, I said with a chuckle. It kinda suits you. She glared up at me as I picked my way through the mess to sit her on the bed. What's that supposed to mean? I retracted my hands from her body and took a step back as soon as I could. There was no way I'd be strong enough to stay that close and not touch her again. It just means your room reminds me of you. A little chaotic but full of surprises. Dell just blinked at me, her expression blank. I'm not sure if that was a compliment or an insult. Definitely a compliment. Now where's the wrap for your ankle? In the bathroom. But I can get it, she said as she tried to climb to her feet. I was there in an instant to gently push her back onto the bed. You need to stay off that foot. I can walk to the damn bathroom and back. Delegate, sit down and let me go get it for you. Or I'm gonna go find one of your siblings and tell them you need to see a doctor tonight. Her eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. You wouldn't try me. Dell's mouth fell open in outrage, but before she could let loose a verbal tirade, I turned and headed toward the door I assumed was the bathroom. Found the wrap in the third place I looked and brought it back out to a still fuming Dell. She reached out a hand, but I held onto the wrap as I knelt down in front of her. What are you doing? She asked. I picked up her swollen ankle and gently started working her shoe off, making sure your ankle gets wrapped properly. I'm perfectly capable of wrapping my own damn ankle, she seethed. I sighed and met her eyes again. Dell, I haven't once said I thought you were incapable of taking care of yourself. I know you could have made it into the lodge, gotten yourself an ice pack, and made it to this room all on your own. But you didn't have to. I'm here. I want to help. I want to make sure you're okay. So please just let me. Dell stared at me for so long, I was sure she was seeing right down to my core. It was like there was nothing I could hide from her. Like she knew every dark secret I had and every shitty thing I'd ever done, and she somehow wasn't running. But then her pretty pink lips curled into a small smile, and for one split second I thought there might actually be a chance for me. If someone like Dell could see that deep inside my soul and still smile at me, maybe I wasn't irredeemable. Okay, she finally said. I swallowed past the lump in my throat and picked up her leg again. The stupid shoe was the first thing to go before I carefully wrapped her ankle. My hands shook as the potent scent of her desire filled my lungs and hollowed out my stomach. When I was finally done, I looked up and met her heated gaze, my hands still shaking as I wrapped them around her thighs. If you want me gone, I need you to tell me to leave again, because the way you're looking at me right now makes me want to stay and do something about it. Dell's lips twitched. Like what? I carefully wrapped her bad leg around my waist before I pushed her backward and covered her body with mine. Let me show you. Chapter 13. Dell. Dell. I rolled away from the annoying sound of my sister's voice and bumped right into a hard, warm wall. Mornin' beautiful. Cracking a single eye open, I looked up at Theo, his big smile making my heart pound faster than it should have so early in the morning. I waited for my common sense to return and the regret to sink in, but surprisingly I didn't feel any of that. I gave a smile of my own and listened as his pulse raced. Morning. Theo watched me for a moment before he growled and dragged me on top of him. My knees were on either side of his hips as I sat on his stomach and looked down into his bright hazel eyes. What do you think you're doing looking so goddamn pretty first thing in the morning? I rolled my eyes but couldn't do anything about the way my cheeks heated with a blush. You must need glasses. I probably look like someone's dog that got left out in the rain. Theo chuckled. You're easily the prettiest wet dog I've ever seen. My head fell back with a loud laugh that was cut short by the pounding on my door. Delilah McCoy. If you don't answer me, I'm coming in there. Del is short for Delilah? Theo asked from beneath me. I nodded and he smiled. I like it. And I liked him. Way more than I was supposed to. Which was a problem. That's it. Evie called through the door. I'm coming in. No. I yelled as she twisted the handle and stuck her head inside, eyes squeezed closed. EW. It smells like you've been slappin' sloppies in here all night. My heart stopped dead in my chest as I looked back down to gauge Theo's reaction. He was already staring at me, eyes wide and only getting bigger as I watched. Finally he choked out, slappin' sloppies? And then dissolved into uncontrollable laughter. Hey, is that Theo? My annoying sister asked from the doorway. Hey Evie, he said between chuckles. Hey handsome. Okay, can you get out now? I interrupted them. Evie propped a hand on her hip, eyes still closed. I was just coming in to see what time you're leaving today and make sure you're packed. Not till 8. I have plenty of time. Girl, it's almost 7. What? I yelled before scrambling off Theo. He let out a loud oof, but I ignored him as I climbed off the bed. What do you mean it's 7? Hollered as I started running around the room, picking up random items of clothing. Del, Theo murmured, and I paused to look at him. He gestured to his lap and then to me and then to Evie, and I finally got the picture. Evie, you can go now. I'm up. My sister took a step backward but then stopped. Do you need help packing? Can come back when y'all are decent. The vice around my stomach loosened the tiniest bit at her offer. Yeah, that would be great. Can you give us a minute? She nodded and retreated again. Come get me when you're done. The door closed behind her, leaving an awkward silence I hadn't expected. Turned back to watch Theo climb out of my bed, not minding the view one bit. Delaware, his voice was stern and my eyes jumped to his. You need to stop looking at me like that if you expect me to keep my hands to myself. I swallowed hard and dragged my gaze away. Sorry. With a deep breath I said, last night was it? As of today we're officially on tour together and nothing else can happen between us. Truthfully, I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince Theo or myself. Everything inside me gravitated toward him and I honestly didn't know how I was going to get through 8 weeks without acting on that. But I didn't have a choice. This was the biggest break I'd ever gotten, and I wasn't going to fuck it up. Just because some guy with a great smile also turned out to be phenomenal in bed. I hope. I know, Theo finally said as he found his boxers and dragged them up his legs. It's fine. We had a great time together and now we get to go our separate ways as friends, right? I pulled my lips into the best smile I could manage. Right. Theo held my gaze for a long moment before shaking his head. But you should put on some damn clothes. I rolled my eyes but located a baggy t-shirt and pulled it over my head. Anyway, when he was fully dressed, he turned to look at me and I froze. We stood there only a few feet apart but suddenly it felt like miles. And the distance only seemed to grow with the silence. Finally he cleared his throat. I should really go. I still need to pack. Too. I nodded. Yeah. At this rate I'll be lucky to make it there on time. I won't let them leave without you. Thanks, I said with a smile. He grinned back for a moment before shaking his head and looking away. Is the fastest way out here the way we came up last night? I shrugged. The window is probably quicker. He raised a brow. The window? Sure. Over here, I said as I led him across the room and slid open the glass. There's a steel storm drain you can climb down. Theo stuck his head out the window before turning back to me. His expression skeptical. You've done this before? My eyes narrowed as I felt where this was going. Yes. Why? I said between gritted teeth. He pressed his lips together like he was fighting off a smile. I've just seen. You have trouble with normal stairs. I couldn't imagine you scaling the wall. Like fucking Spider-Man. I'll have you know I've never fallen while climbing up to this window. He continued to stare at me until I rolled my eyes. Fine. I've fallen a few times on the way down. Theo laughed hard and I scowled harder before he wrapped his arms around my waist and tugged me to his chest. Come here, he said before his warm lips were on mine, shocking me so softly that I forgot about everything else. This kiss was simple and sweet but packed such a punch it rocked me to my core. When he was done, he cupped my face and looked at me for a long time before saying, "See you later, gorgeous." I stood there watching him slip out my window, everything frozen except my heart that beat wildly in my chest. When he'd finally driven out of sight, I took my first real breath in what felt like hours and walked across the room to open the door for my sister. Did Theo leave through the window? She asked as she stepped inside. Yeah, he's gone. You think it was a good idea for him to stay over last night? She asked, gently as she grabbed a pile of clothes off my floor and started folding. I sighed and stepped into the bathroom to run a brush through my hair and scrub the old makeup off my face. Probably not, I admitted. What's gonna happen now you're on tour together? Are y'all gonna keep seeing each other? No, we're not allowed to. I turned to look at her. What does that mean? What? Don't start, Evie. What did that mean? She shrugged as she folded another shirt and set it on a growing stack of clothes. Y'all just seem to have this connection. I don't know how you're gonna spend so much time together and just turn that off. I blew out a deep breath, my shoulders drooping. I don't know either, I mumbled. Then only slightly louder I said, it's never been this way before. Things have never been this intense with anyone else. Evie's eyes grew round. Do you think? My stomach cramped as I glared at my sister. Think what? I spat. Do you think he's your fated mate? She whispered. The pain in my stomach only got worse as her words worked their way through my brain. But as quickly as I'd let them in, I shoved them right back out. No, Evie. He's not my fated mate. Not everyone finds their fated mate. Everyone around here seems to be finned in she muttered as she turned away to fold more clothes. Except me, she said even softer. And me. She was still making sense, and that only made me angrier. What are the odds anyway? I said louder than necessary. First Abby, then Callie and B. That's 3 out of the 5 of us, and you know fated mates aren't that common. There's no way I'm gonna find mine too. That last sentence had an edge of sadness that surprised both of us if my sister's wide eyes meant anything. I cleared my throat and tried again. It's not like I want one anyway. To forever be stuck with one man? To have my life so wrapped up in someone else's that I would literally die if they died? No. Thanks. Even talking about fated mates brought up dark memories I thought I'd buried a long time ago. They were blurry and discolored with age, but that didn't matter. My stomach still twisted painfully as I remembered the day my parents both died because they were fated. I could still smell the smoke from the food left on the stove to burn. I could still see the massive lump of clothing and limbs that used to be my father lying in the middle of the kitchen floor. I could still hear his whispered pleas as he slowly died in my arms. I could still feel the excruciating pain in my head when I screamed so loud I burst one of my eardrums. No, I never wanted a fated mate. That's not gonna happen, I said, even though she still hadn't responded. Okay, Dell, Evie said. Let's just focus on packing for now. I could do that. I had to do that. If I stood here and really thought about the possibility that I just found my fated mate, I might actually throw up. Packing, I said with a nod. Good idea. But all I did was stand in the middle of my messy room and stare at my things. You know what? Why don't you jump in the shower and I'll pack? My shoulders fell with another sigh. Thanks, Evie. She waved me away, and I wasted no time darting into the bathroom. I'd had too much to process this early in the damn morning. What I really needed to focus on was getting to that bus before it left. There was no way in hell I was going to prove Abraham right on the first day. I raced through my shower and the rest of my morning routine before darting back into the bedroom. My feet slammed to a stop as I took in all the extra people. What are y'all doing in here? We came to help you pack and say goodbye, Callie said, her soft voice lined with the tiniest bit of sadness. And to make sure you know we don't agree with what Abby said last night. B. added. Evie giggled. Girl, you should have heard the way Ellie ripped into him after you walked away. B and Callie both smiled and I couldn't help joining. Good, I said. He deserved it. He really did, B agreed. But haven't y'all made up yet? I figured he'd have been down here by now to apologize. The irritation zipped through my veins at breakneck speed as I turned to rummage through my dresser drawers. Nope. Haven't heard from him. He probably knew you had a guest, Evie murmured. A guest? B asked. I turned to glare at Evie, but she wasn't looking at me. Let me guess, Callie spoke up. Theo spent the night. I shrugged and headed for the bathroom again with an armload of clothes. Don't kiss and tell. Since when? B called after me, but I shut the door in her face. With the help of my sisters, I somehow got everything packed and loaded into my old cherry red Camaro with 15 minutes to spare. Thanks for the help, I said as I pulled Evie into my arms and squeezed her small frame. Of course, Dell, she said as she hugged me back. I want a call every day, she added as she pulled away and Callie stepped into her place. Me too. Or a text. A text is fine, Callie said as she held me tight. I'll take a text too, B said as she hugged me next. Everyone will get an individualized text every day. I promise, I said as I climbed into my car. I said phone call Delilah. Evie yelled from outside the car. I started the engine and rolled the window down. Yes, Evelyn. You'll get call. She smiled wide and leaned in to kiss my cheek. Drive safe, break a leg, and keep your coochie to yourself on tour. I tossed my head back and laughed. No promises, I said before I rolled the window up and took off down the driveway. I was running a few minutes late, so the ride to downtown Asheville seemed to take forever, but I still wasn't prepared when I finally arrived. Pulled into the venue's parking lot. Thankful my sisters agreed to figure out a way to bring my car back home while I was away. My heart was thumping in my chest and my palms were sweating as I pulled down the visor and flipped the mirror open. The dark bags under my eyes were proof of the late nights I'd had recently, but I didn't see that changing anytime soon. I wished I'd thrown on some concealer, but it was too late now. Okay, Delaware. You got this, I whispered to myself. When I was sure I had the confidence needed to get out of my car and get on that bus, I turned the engine off and climbed out. Hey! The greeting was spoken at a normal volume, but it seemed to echo like a gunshot in the quiet parking lot. I gasped and spun around to find Theo, standing a few feet away with a garbage bag in his hand and a smile on his face. Oops. Did I scare you? I put a hand over my pounding heart, hoping I could keep it behind my ribcage. What the fuck, Theo? This is a gravel lot. How the hell did you just sneak up on me? He laughed. Unlike you, I'm light on my feet. Ha. Theo chuckled again and held out his hand. I just came to give you your stuff. My eyes lit up as I grabbed the bag from him. My boots. Yeah, they were under the couch like you said. I rummaged through my things, noticing right away what was missing. Theo, I said as I looked up into his eyes. Where are my panties? His smile was so wide and so damn beautiful my heart leapt into my throat. Sorry, he said with a shrug. I'm keeping those. Theo, I warned. He took a step back and raised his hands in the air. It's my memento of our time together. Why don't you just take a picture for a scrapbook like a normal person? Asked through gritted teeth. His whole face lit up. Can I take a picture of you in the panties? No. Theo shook his head. Then never mind. I'll just keep the panties. His smile was infectious, hazel eyes bright with so much humor and mischief I wanted to lose myself in them. But that wasn't an option. I was just hired for the job of a lifetime and I wasn't going to blow it by breaking one of their 2 rules. I had no choice but to get over this little crush on Theo Moore no matter what it took.